Look, I need you to hear me when I say this. Love doesn't always show up the way you expect it to. Some people don't love loud. They don't shout it from the rooftops. They don't post about it on Instagram. They don't flood you with compliments and constant validation, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. See, we've been taught to expect love to look a certain way. And when it doesn't come wrapped in that perfect little package with a bow on it, we think it's not real. But real love, deep love, sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like someone fighting themselves more than they're fighting for you. I'm talking about the avoidant. That person who pulls back when you get too close. That person who needs space right when you need connection. That person who disappears when emotions rise like a storm. You feel rejected, you feel confused, but I came here to tell you something that might just change the way you see it. When an avoidant lets you in, even just a little, it means something. It means they're battling their instincts. They're wired to protect themselves. They've learned through pain, through trauma, that closeness can burn, that vulnerability can wound. So when they text you back, even when they're overwhelmed, that's love. When they sit quietly next to you but don't run, that's love. When they say, I'm not good at this, but still try, that is love. Listen to me. They may not say it with words, but they say it with effort. You got to learn how to read between the lines. That moment when they open up about something personal, that's them handing you the key to a door they never opened. That's vulnerability. That's trust. That's love in its rawest, most unfiltered form. But don't get it twisted. I'm not telling you to settle for emotional unavailability. I'm not saying stick around while they treat you like an afterthought. I'm saying see the difference between someone who avoids because they're afraid and someone who avoids because they don't care. There's a line, and real love is still accountable, still responsible, still willing to grow. See, an avoidant who loves you, they'll stretch, they'll wrestle with themselves for you, they'll show up even clumsily. It won't be perfect, it won't be a rom-com, but it will be real. And you have to be strong enough to hold space for that. You have to decide if you can meet them there without losing yourself in the process. Because their healing ain't your responsibility, but your compassion can be the difference between them retreating forever or learning how to stay. So when they say, I don't know how to do this, but they try anyway, when they fight their flight response just to stand beside you, when they show up, even though everything in their past tells them to run, that's not fear, that's courage. That's not indifference, that's love. Maybe not loud love, but real love. Pay attention, not to what they say, but what they do when it's hard. That's when the truth shows up. That's when the avoidant lets you see what's behind the wall. And when they do, don't blink, don't run, don't miss it, because that right there is what love looks like when it's learning how to stay. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet effort. This truth is hard for people to grasp because we live in a world that teaches us to measure love in volume. We're taught that the louder someone is about us, the more public their affection, the more constant their attention, the more valuable the love must be. We chase the high of good morning texts, the butterflies of romantic gestures, the dopamine hit of affection that looks good in pictures. But love doesn't always operate on that frequency. Love, especially from someone who's wired differently, often whispers when the world expects it to scream. There are people out there, good people, real people, who love quietly. Their love doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with stillness. They might not say, I love you 10 times a day. It might be listening more than they talk, observing more than they interrupt. These things don't trend online, but they real, they raw, and they're rare. People who love quietly often come from places where love had to be earned through behavior, not words. Maybe they grew up around emotional distance. Maybe they learned that speaking feelings out loud made them vulnerable to being hurt, criticized, or ignored. So they adapted. They became careful with their words. They learned to express love in action, not conversation. They learned to protect themselves by doing rather than declaring. So when that person makes space for you in their world, when they change their routine to include you, when they pay attention to your habits, when they remember what you like, what you need, what makes you feel safe, that's love. Quiet love, intentional love, love that doesn't need applause to be meaningful, love that exists even when no one else sees it, love that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. You have to train your eyes to see it, because if you're only looking for love that shouts, you'll miss the one who's whispering it in every small gesture. You'll miss the person who brings your coffee the way you like it, who checks your tire pressure without saying a word, who asks if you've eaten when they can't find the right way to ask if you're okay. You'll miss the late night check-ins, the long drives in silence, the unspoken comfort of their presence when everything feels like it's falling apart. Quiet love is steady, it's consistent. It shows up not just when things are exciting, but when things are difficult, messy, and uncertain. Quiet love doesn't need the spotlight. It doesn't perform it. It just is. And when you recognize it for what it is, you begin to understand that love doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it lowers it because it's not trying to impress you. It's trying to be there for you. Quiet love requires patience to notice and maturity to appreciate. It asks you to let go of your ego, to stop demanding proof in a form that fits your preference. It asks you to listen without needing noise, to feel without needing constant affirmation. It doesn't play games. It doesn't create drama. It builds slowly, brick by brick in the background of your life until one day you look up and realize that you've been standing inside something strong, something stable, something that was always there, even when it didn't look like what you imagined. So the next time someone doesn't say what you want to hear, don't be so quick to assume they don't care. Look at what they do when they think you're not watching. Look at how they respond when you're hurting. Look at how they remember the things that matter to you, even if they never say, "I love you," the way you want to hear it. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's showing up. Sometimes it's staying. Sometimes it's choosing you again and again in silence. That's quiet effort. And that's still love. Avoidants battle their instincts to show they care. This is not something you'll always see on the surface. It's not dramatic or obvious, but deep down, in the middle of every conversation they stay for, every vulnerable moment they don't run from, every second they resist the urge to shut down, it's a fight, a war between their need for self-protection and their desire to connect. And when they choose you, even just a little, they're going to war with everything they've learned to survive. An avoidant isn't avoiding you because you're unworthy. They're avoiding closeness because somewhere along the way, closeness taught them pain. It taught them unpredictability. It taught them that when you let someone in, you also give them the power to hurt you, to leave, to reject the parts of you that feel most fragile. So they built walls, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too deeply and haven't learned how to carry the weight of those emotions without shutting down. They withdraw, not to punish you, but to regulate themselves. They step back, not because they don't care, but because caring, but when they start making different choices, when they lean into connection instead of away from it, when they reach out even when it feels uncomfortable, what you're witnessing is more than love. You're witnessing transformation. You're witnessing someone confronting their wiring, their habits, their emotional armor, and saying, this matters more. That effort, that moment when they override their own instinct to flee, to detach, to silence themselves, that's where the depth is. That's the signal that you mean something to them. You have to understand the cost of those moments, because for an avoidant, emotional closeness can feel like danger. They're scanning for threats even when there aren't any. They're anticipating abandonment, judgment, or suffocation, even when you've done nothing to create that fear. So when they lean in, they're pushing against years of emotional programming. They're saying in their own language, I want to choose you, even if it scares me. That's not easy. That's not light. That's a massive internal shift. They're saying in their own language, I want to choose you, even if it scares me. That's not easy. That's not light. That's a massive internal shift. You might not notice it right away because they don't announce it. They're not going to say, hey, I was about to disappear, but I stayed because I care. Nah, they'll just stay. They'll just answer the text. They'll just open up a little. They'll sit with their discomfort so they don't put distance between you. These are the signs you have to learn to see, because they won't always tell you what they're battling. But if you watch closely, you'll see the signs of the fight. And make no mistake, it is a fight. Avoidants are not choosing between you and someone else. They're choosing between comfort and growth, between the safety of isolation and the risk of connection. And when they move toward connection, even if it's clumsy, even if it's slow, even if it's incomplete, that means they care. Because comfort is easier. Disappearing is easier. Retreating is automatic. But they don't do that. Not every time. They stay, they try, they wrestle with themselves in silence just to keep the door open between you. Sometimes they won't have the right words. Sometimes their care will come in the form of fixing something broken in your house instead of talking about their feelings. Sometimes it'll be a subtle shift in tone, a softening when you're upset, a pause before they pull away. Those pauses matter. That resistance to their own pattern is everything, because avoidance isn't a character flaw, it's a coping mechanism. But caring about you makes them question it, between the safety of isolation and the risk of connection. And when they move toward connection, even if it's clumsy, even if it's slow, even if it's incomplete, that means they care. Because comfort is easier. Disappearing is easier. Retreating is automatic. But they don't do that. Not every time. They stay, they try, they wrestle with themselves in silence just to keep the door open between you. Sometimes they won't have the right words. Sometimes their care will come in the form of fixing something broken in your house instead of talking about their feelings. Sometimes it'll be a subtle shift in tone, a softening when you're upset, a pause before they pull away. Those pauses matter. That resistance to their own pattern is everything, because avoidance isn't a character flaw, it's a coping mechanism. But caring about you makes them question it. Wanting to be close to you challenges the part of them that thought distance was the only way to feel safe. They may not always get it right. They may still retreat. They may still need space. They may still leave texts unanswered when they feel overwhelmed. But they come back. They try again. They reflect. They notice how their silence affects you. And that noticing, that's progress. That's effort. That's love in motion, not in perfection, but in evolution. So when you're wondering if they care, don't look for grand declarations. Look for the moments when they push past what's easy. Look for the times they show up when their whole system is screaming at them to run. That's where their love lives, not in the loud moments, but in the struggle, in the stretch, in the quiet decision to stay just a little longer than they would have before. Vulnerability is their version of I love you. For someone who struggles with emotional closeness, opening up is not natural. It's not automatic. It's not easy. Vulnerability feels like stepping onto a battlefield without armor. And for avoidant types, that's terrifying. They've learned to associate vulnerability with pain, with betrayal, with exposure. They've been taught, either by experience or environment, that showing too much of themselves is dangerous. So when they let their guard down, even a little, that's not just a moment of connection. That's a declaration of trust. That's them saying, in the only way they know how, You matter to me. Most people think love is only real when it's spoken out loud, when it's dressed up in poetry or wrapped in emotional transparency. But for someone who's guarded, love shows up through risk. The risk of letting you see behind the wall, the risk of letting you hold a piece of their truth, the risk of telling you something they've never told anyone else. You might not think it's a big deal when they share a story from their past or admit that they're feeling anxious or even just tell you they had a rough day. But if you knew the fight they went through in their mind just to say it out loud, you'd understand that it's huge. It's their version of saying, I love you. Avoidants don't want to need anyone. That's the root of it. They've been conditioned to believe that needing someone is weakness, that leaning on someone means losing control. So when they start to open up, what they're doing is choosing to challenge their own beliefs. They're choosing to believe, maybe for the first time, that closeness doesn't have to hurt, that they can be seen and still be safe, that they can be known and still be loved. Vulnerability for them is not about comfort, it's about courage. It's about pushing against the fear of rejection, of shame, of abandonment, and stepping into emotional exposure anyway. This is not something they do lightly. It's not something they can sustain easily. Sometimes they'll open up and immediately regret it. You'll see them shut down after they say something real. You'll notice them pull back, get quiet, get defensive. That's not because they didn't mean it. It's because vulnerability is exhausting. It's scary. It makes them feel out of control. But the fact that they went there at all, that's what matters. That means they're trying. That means they're letting you in. And that means you've touched a place in them that few people ever reach. You won't always get the kind of openness you expect. They may not say, I'm hurting. Instead, they'll say, I've been tired lately. They may not say, I need you. They'll say, I've been thinking. It's subtle, it's coded, but it's real. You have to learn how to hear the message behind the mask. Because when they let you see the raw, unfiltered parts of themselves, that's their love language. That's their way of inviting you into a space they don't share with anyone else. Sometimes vulnerability comes in the form of silence too. When they sit with you in a moment of tension instead of walking away, that's vulnerability. When they listen to you talk about your pain without trying to fix it or avoid it, that's vulnerability. When they say, I don't know how to do this, but I'm here, that's vulnerability. Those moments are sacred. They're not accidental. They're intentional. Even if they don't always look polished, they may not always get it right. They may still shut down when it gets too hard. They may still hide when their emotions get too big. But every time they choose to come back to the conversation, every time they try again, every time they take a breath and share a little more, that's love, that's effort, that's growth. And that's vulnerability becoming a bridge instead of a wall. For someone avoidant, vulnerability isn't a given. It's earned, it's deliberate. It's their way of saying, you're safe, I trust you, I'm choosing to let you see me even when I don't fully understand how. There's a difference between fear and indifference. It's one of the most important distinctions to make when you're trying to understand someone who struggles with emotional closeness. On the surface, both fear and indifference can look the same. They can both show up as silence, as distance, as avoidance. They can both leave you feeling confused, rejected, and unsure where you stand. But underneath, the motivations are completely different. Indifference means they don't care. Fear means they care so much it terrifies them. And if you can't tell the difference, you'll end up walking away from someone who's fighting harder than you know. When someone is indifferent, they don't think about you. They don't check in. They don't notice how you're doing, what you're going through, or how their actions affect you. They don't ask questions. They don't remember the little things. Indifference is cold, detached, and effortless. It's not that they're holding back. is that they're not holding on at all. You're not on their mind. You're not in their emotional world. You're an option, not a priority. Their distance isn't strategic or protective. It's careless. It comes from a place of not being invested, not being interested, not being involved. But fear is the opposite. Fear means they feel something, maybe something deep, maybe something unfamiliar, and they don't know what to do with it. Fear makes them pull back, not because they don't care, but because they care in a way that feels overwhelming. It's the fear of needing someone too much, the fear of losing themselves in the connection, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being seen, truly seen, and then rejected. That kind of fear doesn't come from a lack of love. It comes from a history of pain, of vulnerability used against them, of emotional intimacy that ended in wounds. A person who's afraid of love often doesn't know how to be in it without trying to control the outcome. And when they can't control the outcome, they try to control their feelings instead. That's when the walls come up. That's when the shutdowns happen. That's when they disappear, not because they've stopped loving you, but because they're overwhelmed by how much they do. The love is there. It's just trapped under layers of caution, of hesitation, of self-protection. They're not pushing you away because they're done. They're pushing you away because they're scared of what it means to let you stay. You'll notice the difference in how they respond when you express your needs. Someone indifferent will dismiss you, minimize you, or ignore you completely. They won't adjust. They won't reflect. They won't care that you're hurt. But someone who's afraid, they'll listen, even if they get defensive at first. They'll come back after time to think. They'll try, even if the effort is imperfect. They may fumble, they may fall short, but they'll show signs that they're working through something real. They'll come forward again, even if it's slow. They'll remember what you said, even if they didn't know how to respond in the moment. Another sign of fear over indifference is how they treat your emotions. The indifferent person will walk right over your feelings like they don't exist. The avoidant who's afraid will freeze or shut down, not because your feelings don't matter, but because they matter too much. They're terrified of causing harm. They're scared that conflict means rejection. So they avoid confrontation, not out of disrespect, but because they're still learning that love can survive tension, that closeness doesn't have to end in chaos. They're not unfeeling. They're overwhelmed by feelings and trying to manage them in the only way they know how. Fear carries weight. Fear creates hesitation. Fear makes a person retreat when what they really want is to be held. You can feel that tension in their presence. You can sense it in the pauses, the inconsistencies, the way they hover at the edge of connection without fully stepping in. They're watching, measuring, trying to figure out if it's safe to give you more. That's not apathy. That's love under pressure. That's emotion under restraint. That's someone trying to rewire their emotional reality in real time, often without the tools to do it smoothly. If you mistake fear for indifference, you'll misinterpret everything. You'll think their silence means they're gone when it really means they're stuck. You'll think their absence means they don't care when it might mean they're overwhelmed by how much they do. Fear and indifference look alike at a glance, but they feel different if you pay attention. One is absence. The other is presence in conflict. One is cold. The other is trembling beneath the surface, waiting for enough safety to emerge. Real love shows up even when it's uncomfortable. It doesn't wait for perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It doesn't require safety or certainty. Real love steps forward in the middle of fear, in the middle of chaos, in the middle of every excuse to walk away. Especially for someone who struggles with emotional intimacy, showing up is not about convenience, it's about choice. It's about choosing you, even when every part of them wants to run. It's about showing up for the relationship, even when it doesn't come naturally, even when it costs them comfort, pride, or control. For someone with avoidant tendencies, discomfort is a constant companion when it comes to closeness. The deeper the connection, the more vulnerable they feel. The more vulnerable they feel, the more instinct tells them to create distance. That instinct isn't rooted in a lack of love. It's rooted in a survival strategy. They learn somewhere that closeness equals risk, that letting someone get too close means giving up safety. So when they fight that instinct, when they stay, when they speak, when they engage, they are not just participating in love, they are transforming. It might not look like what you're used to. Showing up might not mean long, emotional talks or grand displays of affection. It might mean listening when they want to shut down. It might mean replying to a difficult message when their instinct is to disappear. It might mean holding your hand during a moment of conflict, not because they're comfortable, but because they're choosing presence over protection. These things might seem small, but for someone who's built their life around avoiding emotional exposure, they're massive. Showing up is love in action. It's not about flawless communication or perfect timing. It's about trying. It's about returning. It's about staying in the room when every muscle in their body wants to walk out. It's about not letting fear have the final word. That's what makes it real. That's what gives it value, because real love isn't just about what's easy. It's about what's earned. It's about the effort to keep moving forward, even when the terrain is unfamiliar and uncomfortable. You'll see it in the way they circle back after they've distanced themselves, in the way they admit they were wrong, even if the words come out awkward, in the way they try to meet you halfway, even when they don't fully understand what you need yet. Avoidants don't move fast, but when they care, they move deliberately. They don't show up loudly, but when they do, it's real, it's thoughtful, it's vulnerable, and it costs them something. There's a strength in that kind of love that often gets overlooked because we're taught to value the flashy, the romantic, the expressive. But real love, the kind that sustains and transforms, is found in the small, consistent choices to lean in instead of pull away. It's found in the awkward moments, the quiet apologies, the attempt to stay emotionally available even when it feels foreign. When an avoidant shows up for you, they're choosing to act against every self-protective impulse they've ever known. That's not weakness, that's bravery. They might not have all the tools. They might not always say the right thing. They might still struggle with consistency or openness, but their presence means something. Their continued effort means something. Even when they mess up, they try again. They learn. They reflect, they evolve, not because it's comfortable, but because love gives them a reason to stretch beyond their old limits. And that growth, that slow, uncomfortable, beautiful stretch, that's where real love lives. Sometimes showing up means having a difficult conversation they would normally avoid. Sometimes it means apologizing without knowing exactly how. Sometimes it means making space for your emotions when they're barely managing their own. These are the moments that matter, not because they're smooth or perfect, but because they're intentional, because they reflect a deeper commitment than surface level affection, because they come from someone who's learning to stay, to open up, to be present, even when it's hard. Love from an avoidant might not feel like a fairy tale. It might feel like slow progress, like tiny breakthroughs, like subtle changes in behavior. But underneath all of it is a decision to keep showing up, to keep facing discomfort, to keep choosing the relationship over the instinct to escape. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it last. Because anyone can love when it's easy, but when it's hard, when it's vulnerable, when it's messy, that's where the truth shows up. That's where love proves itself.